welcome MEA 125 folks. I know we usually do this in person, but in the interest of trying to give you a lot of information and get you in the field shooting quicker, I thought what I would do is actually do this photography lecture on your YouTube so that you can go back and look at it again. I don't know why it looks so dark, by the way. In any event, we are going to be talking about photography. And of course, when you see this, you're either very likely are going to see this after Austin has talked to you about cameras, or you might even get a head start. I'm going to put it in the module so that you guys can kind of click on it. One thing you have to remember, though, is there will be a quiz on what I'm talking about here. So make sure you watch this from start to finish, okay? Shouldn't be too long. Let's go through it kind of quickly, all right? So let's talk about the fact that you're going to be using cameras and that photography is a critical part of what you're going to be doing to do storytelling here over the final 6 weeks of the semester. And then, of course, hopefully join us in MEA 225 in the spring and future. Anyway, video defines television. It provides pictures that enhance a story and make it real. Think about anything that you've watched, whether it be a film, you've watched something on television, maybe something on Netflix, or maybe you've watched something, a news story that you really liked, or a sports story for that matter, for my sports people. But the fact is if the video is not good, it's not going to be that good a story, right? You might have great writing, you might have set up the greatest interview, but if the visual side of it kind of falls apart, then the story falls apart, right? We've talked about the term wallpaper. Remember, we talked about that in terms of a VO or a VOSOT, where essentially all you're doing is you're not really thinking through what you are trying to connect visually to your story. You're just kind of being very generic. Well, that can be wallpaper, right? Which is pictures that are just pasted on the screen to cover a story, not necessarily with any connection to the words or the visual, right? So for example, with wallpaper, I think I used the example of, let's say that you were doing a story about the fact that there was the parking was becoming congested again, because we have more people returning to campus, and you talk about how it's congested in your script, but when you go out and shoot it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and there's nobody in the parking lot, there's no connection, right? So again, that's wallpaper. Or you're talking about something that you specifically want to see on screen in your story and we don't see it, right? That's also wallpaper. So video can work with and define the story and make it clear and exciting to the viewer clearly. All right. News photographers have a professional skill. That is you, by the way. We talked about this at the very beginning of the semester that, you have to be versatile. And even if you just want to be a reporter or a quote unquote anchor, the fact is you're also going to be a photographer as well. It's a multi-dimensional, multimedia type of environment these days. So news photographers have professional skill and expertise that go far beyond operating cameras and editing systems. So you are really what you're called as a photojournalist. Now, you may have heard of this term if you've done any kind of still photography. That is also a term that they use in the still photography world, but basically photojournalists are responsible for both gathering information and getting pictures that advance the story. So not only are you shooting video, but you're also, while shooting video, you're also gaining information so that you can build a story. So there's a very common term out there now called multimedia journalist, or if you want to simplify it even further, one-person band. It used to be called one-man band, but we're in 2022. So the term is either one-person band or multimedia journalist. All right, so as a photojournalist slash multimedia journalist, you have to know how to talk to people and ask the right questions. We spent some time learning how to ask, or at least talk to people a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about interviewing. Well, you're going to be doing this with a camera instead of just your phone and a microphone, right? So even when news photographers are working with the reporters, so say you're working in teams, you can still make the story succeed or fail by the pictures that you capture. Or if you're going out on your own, which happens frequently in this day and age, you basically have to understand that you're going to have to talk to people to get the story. And even if you're just a photographer working for a larger station, many of our photographers, for example, at ABC7, are also expected to act like a reporter, even though we'll never see them on air, because they're going to be sending video back that a producer, a writer, someone like myself will later put together based on what that photographer has gathered from the field. So it's critical that in the world of photojournalism, not only do you learn how to obviously physically operate a camera, set that camera up, aesthetically set that camera up so that it gets good video, but you also have to not be shy and realize that ultimately you're going to have to put that camera in somebody's face and get the story. All right. At the scene, the photographer will survey the area. Okay, so this is, again, goes to your, like, you know, your brain. You have to attempt to understand the specific event. You have to examine the possibilities of showing context for the story. So take, for instance, that you're doing a story on a traffic accident that happens outside school and that ties up traffic and ties up students, you know, who are now getting having to show up to class late because they're having trouble parking because they can't get on campus. So how would you kind of visually explain that story? Well, certainly you can't do it without showing the accident scene itself. Maybe you show the line of cars that are waiting to get into campus because they can't get past the accident scene. Maybe, you know, a little bit later, you go up to the parking lot and you show students who are kind of frantically walking fast, trying to get to class. I mean, all of these things kind of like explain sort of the stress of what happened. And of course, one of the things that I will say when it comes to accident scenes, and Austin Dave will tell you the same thing, is that when you roll up on an accident scene, there's certain rules that, you know, we will go over later in the semester on how to handle yourself. But in terms of shooting, you always want to get the victims first because they're always going to be the first to be taken away from the scene by ambulance or whatever. It's the wreckage that usually remains longer. So again, remember that. Okay. Ask yourself these questions at the scene of any story you're on. This can be feature, breaking news, something in the middle, right? What's going on? What can you see? What do you hear? Where do you think are the best shots? It all comes down to thinking, right? So obviously, if you're doing a story on congested parking, the best shots are cars, right? In the parking lot, driving around and around and around, various angles of those cars, frustration of maybe drivers, right? Maybe you zoom in and you can actually see, you know, a student behind the wheel who's kind of mad because they can't find a parking spot, right? You know, you can show cars that are already parked. You can show congestion, you know, just from the cars that are in the lot already. So these are the kinds of things that you need to think about. If you're, you know, you're doing a story on, you know, a high school graduation, for example, pomp and circumstance, right? Close-ups of students with the caps, right? Smiles on the faces, parents in the crowd, you know, signage, right? All of this can add to your story. All right, so what caused the event and how can that cause be illustrated? What, if you're talking to somebody, what is the interviewee talking about? Listen to what they say because they might give you an idea of what to shoot. We've always talked about if you can get an opportunity to talk to someone before the story, it's better because then you'll know what to shoot. Sometimes it'll happen afterwards and then, you know, you're going to have to kind of use your best judgment. But what pictures will help illustrate the interviewee's comments, right? You have to anticipate. So a lot of thinking goes into the, you know, the art of photojournalism. So how do you do it, right? So what are you thinking about? You always hear us talk about, hey, make sure you shoot a sequence, build a sequence, right? Well, a sequence basically consists of this terminology. First of all, you have what's called a wide shot, okay, which is also known as an establishing shot. And basically anything that you shoot, and you see this in narrative television and film as well, is you have to establish where you are, right? So you need an establishing shot. So, you know, obviously if it was the, you know, congestion in the parking lot, the establishing shot would be a wide shot as much as you can of the parking lot looking full, right? In this case on the screen here, years and years and years ago, I did a video, we did a video, I should say, for The Center for Applied Competitive Technology, or as I called it, the Employee Training Institute, or ETI for short. And basically, they were working, this center was working with local businesses to help train workers to make these businesses more efficient. And so these businesses actually wound up awarding the ETI with, sort of this appreciation award. So we did a video on what they do. So at one point, the center was, contained within this building. So this is kind of the wide shot, right? So if we're talking about this center, this basically is going to be the establishing shot. This is going to establish pretty much right away what we're talking about visually, even if we don't even say it on script, right? But the fact is it should be within reason. The first shot a photog should take when shooting begins, it should contain all the visual elements of a story and scene. The shot should also show relationships that yield information, right? And it's going to start your sequence by establishing what the viewer will be seeing and what the relationship is to all the elements used in that story. So we have to assume that everything we see after this shot is going to be somewhat related to the Employee Training Institute. If you're showing a football field, at graduation, then of course the rest of the shots that we see are going to be by kind of default all graduation related, right? If you're shooting a shot of say, for example, the cafeteria here at school getting busy again because we have more students on campus, then you can think of, all right, wide shot of cafeteria, and then where would you go from there, right? To better describe the story, to better connect visually the story to your, script to viewer, right? So that's what the medium shot is all about, right? This can depend on what the wide shot is. So based on this shot right here, we have to assume that Pam here is in an office of the Employee Training Institute. If we don't show, if this is our first shot in the sequence, this could be any office anywhere here at COC, or quite honestly, the world, right? This doesn't have context yet, but with this wide shot, it does. All right, so the medium shot can depend on what the wide shot is. It concentrates on the subject with little attention given to anything else. And of course, medium, we'll hear Austin say medium tight, medium tight, medium tight, medium tight, right? Medium shots and what we call tight shots, which I'll introduce you here in a second, are kind of what really move the sequence along, but that's Pam. So now, obviously, we have what's coming up next, which is the close-up. Now, in this case, the close-up, we have a lot of different choices here because we can show Pam, a tighter shot of Pam looking at the computer. We can show what's on the screen. We could actually probably even show what's on a Post-it, the pen, her hands on the keyboard, and we go with hands on the keyboard. Notice, by the way, that her hands are in relatively the same spot. That's called matching the action. And so when you're doing something, if you're shooting a scene where there's repetitive motion, it makes it very easy to match the action. Somebody hammering a nail, somebody, maybe you're showing a scene of some flooding and people are, consistently taking buckets of water to kind of, reduce the water that's in a certain area. You'll have plenty of time to get what's called matching the action. But the close-up, with its sense of physical intimacy, can probe the individual and personal aspects of what a program is communicating. I think a close-up, guys, connects the viewer to the story, right? If you think about a parking lot, right? Think about a wide shot of all the cars in the parking lot. Yes, is that an important shot? Absolutely. But what about the shot of somebody of somebody trying to find a parking spot and you can actually see the frustration? That's a close-up. What about, for example, a fire? You're across the street, you shoot a house fire, and then of course you get a shot of the house that's kind of charred. Well, what about a teddy bear, right? A teddy bear on the lawn that's just completely singed beyond belief. That really hits home. Okay. So basically, it's designed to be subjective, okay? It can bring out the drama in a situation. And of course, there's some examples: burning embers of a fire, water flowing past sandbags during a flood, right? You're doing a story on a biology class that's particularly difficult. You've got a close-up of a student who looks like they're kind of stressed, trying to figure out what they're being told. These are all things that are obviously very important close-ups, or as we also call them, tight shots. You'll hear tight, tight, tight. That is another term for close-up. And by the way, this is my favorite shot. Hopefully you're listening still, because that is on the quiz. All right. Basic camera directions. All right. So let me play this for you here. This is a pan, not a very good one, but a pan. And basically what it means is a horizontal move to the left or the right. And what it's intended to do essentially is show a relationship or more information than is contained in just one static shot. So in this case, we were shooting this as part of that ETI video. They were talking about how they created this sort of walkway between one side of the factory to the other, or warehouse, I should say. And we were kind of showing how that, how that kind of looked. Now, I would say bad shot here, bad shot on my part, because I'm shooting directly in the light. Always good to shoot with the light source behind you, just saying. All right, what about the 3 to 5 second rule? What does that mean? Well, that means that you should never go more, and honestly, I'll even say about 3 seconds. That camera move that you do from left to right, right to left, cannot be more than 3 seconds. You can go 5, but man, it's going to take a long time to do it. Not to mention you're going to cover a lot of ground, which can be very disconcerting to the eye if you're as a viewer, or you just, like, let's say you have 30 seconds to tell a story and you burn 5 seconds off one pan. That's one shot. So my suggestion is 3 seconds tops, right? You don't want to go, but you want to do 3 seconds. And it's a little hard to describe without doing this in person, but I also call this the 45-degree rule. So let me see if I can back up here. I have my arms stretched out wide. So from my left hand to my right hand is that's 180 degrees. This right here is about 90 degrees. So I'm going to bring my left hand in and show you that right here, that's about a 45-degree spread right there of my arms. That should be the max amount that you should pan or tilt, for that matter. We'll talk about tilting in here in a second. 45 degrees max. 3 seconds, 45 degrees. Okay. So tilt, just like a pan, except it's in a vertical direction. By the way, if I might mention, when you pan, zoom, tilt, right, you should basically have your starting spot of your shot. You should be able to roll for a handful of seconds in a stationary position before you move the camera, and then do so when you finish that camera move, because in all honesty, you're probably not going to use that pan. You're probably going to use however you framed the shot originally. And so be careful. So always count a long count of 3, move, long count of 3, then stop recording, whether it's a pan, tilt, or a zoom. All right, so here's a tilt. This is not very good because it's not a really well-framed shot, but I'm tilting up on Kurt as he walks by. I'm tilting up on my dog to reveal more, right? So that's what a tilt is. Again, same kind of applicable, 3 to 5 seconds, really 3, even less if you can on a tilt. Tilts usually go a little quicker than pans. The shot must start from one properly framed picture and end on another. In this case, with Biscuit, this is fine. This is fine. This, however, is not fine. So be careful with tilts, or they can be very, very difficult, right? But both a pan and a tilt are used to show more info. All right, then we have what's called a zoom, right? Which is easily the most overused shot in the field of photography. If you've ever seen any kind of home video, it's like zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. And it makes you just want to like vomit with the amount of movement that goes on. But it should be considered a link, just like between a pan and a tilt, a link between 2 static shots. The ending shot of a zoom should contain different, at least more info than the start of the shot. So in this case, we start tight on or close up on a person, and we wanted to reveal how his role plays in the larger, kind of area of the factory. And so you can see that that's our zoom. Kind of slow. I would have zoomed out a little bit quicker, I think, if I were myself back, if I could go back in time and change it. But that's a zoom. You can either zoom out or zoom in. But again, I'm just going to tell you, when it comes to pans, tilts, zooms, I hope you're listening. Don't do them. When you're learning how to shoot, shoot only static, stationary, well-composed shots. I will absolutely fillet you if you try to do camera moves. All right. Only photographers that have been at it for, a steady amount of time can actually get away with good camera move shots, because you do see them. But when you're new, they are simply distracting and, for lack of a better term, suck. Okay. So anyway, if you're going to zoom, always zoom from something important to something else that is important. And again, just like your tilt and your pan, make sure the beginning and ending shots can stand alone as static shots. Again, 3 to 5 seconds for that rule. Make sure you show, zoom is to show a particular element contained in the wider picture. It's to show a spatial relationship. Those are reasons for zooms. But again, I highly discourage you from doing that. All right. We also have what's called angled shots, which are my favorite shots, because if you think about it, I am staring into a very flat surface. You are watching me in a very flat surface. I mean, you can't even tell over my shoulder basically how far this basketball, beer bottle, Gordon, what is my on this side? Gordon Ramsay up here. There he is. Gordon Ramsay from Hell's Kitchen, my little bobblehead, right? If you walked into my room, you could probably see there's a good, from me to Gordo here is probably a good 3 or 4 feet, but he looks like he's right behind me because this shot's so flat. So how do you make that, how do you get depth then? Well, you do it with angled shots, right? In striving to get plenty of interesting shots, the photographer should work at finding interesting angles. So take a look at this train. Now, if we had just taken a step, you can see my cursor here. If I was shooting this at a 90-degree angle, this would not be an interesting shot, but we're not. We're actually shooting this where the train is in the foreground, the silos are in the background, and you can clearly tell there's a horizon line and a difference in terms of distance between the train and the silos. I think this is good. You can do the same thing in photography. With angled shots, though, you either have to be very, very creative on the tripod, or if you are not shooting on the tripod, which I hate, at least put the camera on a solid surface and find a different look in which to, to show me what would be a normal shot. So angled shots are great. You can try them, but just make sure that you're not, a shaky mess when you do it. As for framing skills, this shot should be composed or framed. The shot should be composed or framed before you record. Right? I think it's very useless when you basically are, trying to do it after you've rolled, right? And it's just useless clip footage. Make sure you just frame it up and then hit record. This should be, by the way, let me change that. That should be called digital media on your card. I thought I caught this before I actually updated it. So I'm going to change it right now, and we're going to change this to useless footage. All right, there we go. And of course, fill the screen. Fill the screen with what you want the audience to see. So again, if I'm your shot, you don't want me here, right? See how much headroom I have? You don't want me here because now you just see my neck, right? If we're showing this book here, right? This is my, what if I do this? Or I do this? Or I do this? That's not filling the screen. This is filling the screen. So fill your screen. Okay. What are you showing the audience? If you're interviewing someone, fill the screen with the person. You don't need to, so this is Kurt. Right center, obviously, if I'm standing to the left of the camera, we'll explain more about this as we get into, framing. But, if you are standing to the left of the camera, you want your person to be right center with very little headroom. You don't need to cut off their head. If you're standing on the other side of the camera, then it would be more like this. So notice I'm on the left center now, okay? So you don't need to show a lot of space either above or below or to the left or right of a person unless intentional. All right, think in thirds, guys. The photographer thinks of the video screen as a grid. So divide the screen into equal blocks. So right now you don't see anything. But if I give you the rule of thirds, you'll notice that the most interesting aspects of this shot is at the intersection of a couple of points here. You could also do it over here as well. but the part of the shot that's most important is to see should be at one of the intersections of the top horizontal line with the vertical line. So again, a lot to think about when you're setting up a shot, but the more you do it, the more this will become second nature. The bottom line is you don't want this house, the top of the house down here, because then you get too much sky, right? And how many times have we seen it where someone is shooting a shot intending to make, like, for example, one of our students was showing us a couple weeks ago a shot of this concert in the park at Santa Clarita, and we had all of this sky, and the people were like, you know, in the bottom half of the screen. You don't want that. Okay, so remember, the most basic requirement for framing a good camera shot is to fill the screen with what you want the audience to see. Empty space is no good and visually terrible. All right, last but not least, before I wrap up this, like I said, very somewhat quick photography lesson, is the 10-second rule. What does that mean? Well, it means that you need to roll on every single time you roll your shot for at least 10 seconds. Count to 10 in your head. You will thank me later, because if you're shooting a shot of students walking maybe to or from a class, and you bump the camera, like, you know, halfway in there, and you get out at 6 seconds, it's an unusable shot. Hold the camera still. Don't bump it. Don't shake it. Don't breathe on it. Keep it still. Use a tripod. I've got it capitalized twice. I will know if you don't. If you don't use a tripod, or you need, if a tripod is impractical for a certain shot, then make sure it's on a solid surface. All right, we'll talk about those tips as we go with critiques. Get plenty of shots, B-roll, okay? You've heard me mention A-roll and B-roll. B-roll is your video, right? It's what you use to tell the story. A-roll is obviously interview sound, right? So get plenty of shots, shoot wide, medium, and tight. A lot of variety, wide, medium, and tight. Okay. So that is a basic photography lesson. I am going to do one more thing here, if you can bear with me. Let me get this, you know what, I may have dumped it. Maybe I didn't. Hold on, guys. Let me find it here. Yeah, here we go. Where are you? It's been a while since I've been on Zoom, so forgive me. Let me share my screen here, and I'm going to show you. So I have a link in the Google Drive that's in your Canvas that has all of these different tips on 180-degree rule. Here's the demo that Austin will be doing. We actually have an inception lecture in here as well, which we'll be doing later in the semester. Composition, dissecting the story, all of this. But look, these are all different, these are all different clips that you can click on. And a lot of these are photography related. So I would highly recommend that you spend some time looking at photography. I've provided the links in the Canvas, so they should be easily found. And yeah, so I am really looking forward, guys, to seeing what you can do with photography. Obviously, we don't do this very often where I record a Zoom lecture, but I felt like it was important this time. And definitely see you back in the classroom. Remember, there will be a quiz on this, so we'll see you later.